sure.
Nice.
Really. So yeah,
Ah,
talk about
cool.
whatever.
Okay, yeah, sounds good. I do have a few questions first, which is, well, I guess I'll give some context, which is that when I came across your channel and your video, it immediately drew my attention because I didn't notice a lot of Asian people in this kind of like this spiritual space.
Mm,
And so I was immediately drawn by you, and I was very curious to hear about how your relationships has evolved
mhm.
um, after coming into, I guess, your awakening. Because that's something that I'm currently experiencing right now. And I find it very difficult to navigate how my family deals with what's happening in terms of like me changing my perception on how life works. So yeah, I would love to hear how your experience was.
Yeah, yeah. It was the biggest challenge for this character.
Mm,
Like, yeah, Asian culture is so there's so much pressure on the children,
yeah.
like an immense amount. And yeah, so I'm Korean, and even
Okay.
in Korea, like the pressure there is so immense that suicide is like ridiculous.
Hmm.
And I feel luckily I was American. I was born here, so and my parents weren't that extreme, I think.
Okay.
In my opinion, they still definitely expected a lot from me, but I was also the second child, so a lot of pressure was put on my sister.
Mm,
And I was also not academically that inclined. I was more of an artist, and
hmm.
I struggled a lot in school. I think I
Hmm.
was dyslexic, but I wasn't diagnosed or anything. But like I was in ESL, but I was born here. But my English was fine. I just
Yeah.
couldn't pay attention if I wasn't interested, I think.
Yeah. Yeah.
So they did just encourage, like, yeah, do art, you're really good at it. And they didn't put that much pressure on me to like super excel at school.
Okay.
Well, even that was like, I think, a good starting point for a child to just be like, we don't expect you to be like your sister in that way.
Hmm.
That's the sense that I got, even though I really wanted to be as good as her.
Hmm.
It was just uh, at least I had art, I guess. The
Yeah.
identity really latched on to art and was like, this is my thing, this is my identity. Um, there's so much to talk about with family. Like this character went through a lot.
Yeah.
She went through an intense like detaching process, apparently, in the story.
Hmm.
Um, her parents were not happy
Hmm.
because she traveled a lot and like left the so-called responsibilities of like being an adult behind.
Hmm.
Um and you know, especially my mom, she was so sad that she couldn't tell her friends and her and our relatives that you know, I was making this amount of money and I had this kind of title, and I was making I was using everything I learned in college and all of that time invested in a career for like 8 years.
Hmm.
That was all going down the drain slowly.
Yeah.
Um, but she could also see how miserable I was too, because by the end of my career, I had a really good title. I was an art director. I had so
Mm.
much responsibility. I was making a lot of money,
Hmm.
and I was the most miserable in my life. Like
Wow.
the depression came back full on, and the drinking came back, the partying came back, the making the stupid decisions came back, and I was a wreck, like
Mhm.
total wreck. And yet on the outside, I looked really good, and my mom was happy, even though I was miserable.
Right, right.
Um, but yeah, I think because of health reasons too, it it made it clear to me like I can't sustain this.
Mhm.
And so yeah, I quit and then traveled again. And at that point, I do think my mom at least was like, she's gonna be who she is. She's done this before. I don't
Mhm.
think she's gonna really change.
Okay.
And she still wanted me in her life, apparently.
Yeah.
So um but it wasn't easy. Like we fought a lot, and had a lot of distance to reflect on. She changed a lot too. Like she really came to terms with, maybe I can't make my daughter my everything.
Mhm.
Maybe I need to find my own happiness somehow and
Oh,
not
wow.
put that on her.
Yeah.
But it took years to get to that point. It wasn't
Mhm.
easy, and a lot of fighting. And
Oh, man.
um for this character, it was more like I had to put myself first, which was terrifying and uncomfortable and so unlike her. It
Mhm.
was so foreign that it was so painful to put herself first.
Mhm.
And that had to be done. And in a way, I think my mom learned through that she had to put herself first too. She
I
can't put
see.
her children first.
Yeah, I have a very similar situation, except I want to say maybe a bit more extreme because I'm Chinese and I'm an only child. So I'm like your older sister, I
Oh,
feel.
okay.
Yeah, and it's really tough. I put a lot of expectations and pressure on me. And I think we're all born with this innate trust in our parents. And there's usually I recognize this pattern that there's usually two paths that children take when parents kind of have this image of the life you should have, right? I, the one path is you simply obey and you listen. And the other path was like kind of rebel. I I obeyed and I went along with it because they said, yo, do good in school so you can go to a good college, do good in college so you can get a good job. I'm like, okay, I trust you. And I didn't question it. I just did all of that stuff. And then I did get quite a comfy job, high paying, like software developer job. But when I got there, I'm just like, this isn't me. Like this doesn't feel right. And it just hit me like this isn't my dream. Like this is the dream that they've assigned for me. And I never got to pursue my own dreams because of fear-based decision making. And after I went to Peru and took plant medicine, specifically ayahuasca, it really opened up my eyes that, you're allowed to pursue your own dreams. You're allowed to put yourself first. A lot of, I feel like this world has kind of mislabeled it as selfishness when it's really like self-love, and feels like there's a lot of mislabeling going on. But hearing this coming from you really gives me hope because you say your mom changed and she was able to kind of put herself first and learn that she can't rely solely on you for her happiness. My mom hasn't learned that yet. That's the process that I'm going through right now. I feel like she's loving herself through me, which I I feel like is unhealthy. I want her to pursue her own happiness while I pursue my happiness. And of course, I still want to do stuff for her, but I don't want to feel imposed to do a specific choice in my career for what she deems is the best. So that's causing a lot of friction. And actually, when I came back and I told my mom about it, she did some reading, and she was like, hey, I heard ayahuasca is witchcraft. And yeah, and she was like, her and my dad, they told me they started being afraid of what I'm about to say, because my mentality has shifted so much. It's it's very jarring to me. So it's definitely very jarring for them to see their son just change so drastically in such a short span of time. And I find it very hard to kind of have a equilibrium in our relationship, because I'm so present now. I'm not worrying about the future anymore. I'm not dwelling about the past anymore, because there's no real substance to those things, right? The past can only exist in the form of memory, and the future can only exist in the form of imagination. So there's no real substance to either of those things in this present moment. And I had this unshakable trust in this experience that we're all having, that everything is absolutely fine and everything will be absolutely fine. Um, but it's so hard to get them to understand that. And really, I guess they probably can't understand it unless they've experienced it themselves. So I get a very strong sense that you're similar in the way that you're very present. That's one of the main things I get when I listen to you, is that you're incredibly present. So when it comes to talking to maybe not even just your family, people in general, they're quite fixated on the future. Like, what are your plans? And a lot of times they worry about the future. So how do you navigate that in a society that's so fixated on the future?
Yeah. So communication had to apparently just really developed because not only did me and my mom have a language barrier, like I'm not that good at Korean, especially
Mhm.
spiritual terms.
Yeah, yeah, yeah,
Well,
yeah.
I the way I described things to her was so minimal and basic, uh, and I was okay with just expressing minimally as little as I could at the time, because
Mhm.
I was also suffering. There was so much suffering here and so much pain that was coming up. I couldn't I couldn't make sure she was okay too. I just didn't have the capacity. So
Ah,
I limited my communication as much as I could, but I there there's still conditioning here to really care about them, obviously. So
right.
I would check up on her, and um she also has a thing of like really needing me to do things for her because she
Mhm.
just doesn't know English that well. So like I'm the
Mm.
person. I'm I was her husband. When they got divorced, I was
Yeah.
her husband who did all of that for her. So it was really hard for her to finally like be like, shit, I'm alone. I have to like figure this out. And I
Mhm.
tried to help her as much as possible, but I was also really tough on her.
Mm.
I said, I'm sorry, I can't do this anymore.
Yeah.
Like, and so she did suffer. She had to, find other routes. She had to ask friends and go to like community services, and I did feel extremely guilty, but
Mhm.
um but what are you going to do? I mean, I was so miserable.
Yeah, yeah.
But yeah, the future thing, even for this, yeah, this character was very future oriented too. So it was also really hard for her to let go of the future, um, let alone try to explain to her parents that it wasn't important to her when it kind of still was, but she knew that it wasn't really real. And
Yeah.
like you can't live in the future. It
Right.
produces a lot of suffering if you do that.
Yeah.
It's fine if you do, but like it's just not really real. So um yeah, it was a lot of like whenever we would have conversations, I would get really triggered. So my dad would say things like, when are you going to go back into society? And,
Mm,
you know, do you need money? And did I do something wrong? Did I raise you wrong? And
mm-hmm,
it was hard to hear things like that. And,
mm-hmm,
you know, he was partially blaming himself a lot for
mm-hmm,
my decisions. And yeah, how it arose here was just like, the person took all the responsibility and said, um, these are all my choices. This has nothing to do with you.
yep,
Um, just know that I'm okay.
yeah,
Even though the person didn't know that it would be okay,
mm-hmm.
um, she would just lie a little bit and just, I'm doing fine.
Yeah,
Because I also made sure I was financially okay, that I
yeah,
wouldn't have to go to extremes and stuff like that.
right,
In a sense, I was okay. Even though I wasn't working. I was using my savings, and
mm-hmm,
I was basically out of society. I was not
mm-hmm,
really talking to friends that much.
mm-hmm,
I was talking to my sister because we're just close. We've always been close. Um, but I was mainly at the time within certain communities where I resonated, and I
mm-hmm,
would make some bonds like that.
mm-hmm.
And my teacher was my main like source of comfort and um just like feeling of okayness. Like, you will seem crazy to others, you will.
Yeah, yeah,
this is not this is not accepted by society. This is not
right,
understandable by society. And
mm-hmm.
in a way, this is not a good or bad thing. It's Society is insane because it is
Yes,
based on a false illusion. So when the seeming process of, you know, the disillusion of all of that, you will look crazy, but
yep,
you're actually going to sanity, even though all of these, there's internal turmoil because there's just so much conflict, you know,
yeah,
your
yeah,
past and all of that. So you will seem really crazy. And I do think sometimes the less you share with certain people, you know, won't understand,
yeah,
is probably better for you.
yeah.
Just to say like minimal stuff, you know?
Gotcha. That is, I think, something for me to learn because I've always been the type to kind of overshare. I'm quite open naturally because I never saw a reason why not to be. I'm very comfortable being vulnerable and everything, and I find that it's a great way to actually connect with people because when I show that I'm okay being vulnerable in front of you, oftentimes they kind of reciprocate, and then we end up getting tighter together. Um, but I completely understand how, especially in this society, oversharing, it will simply, well, one, they won't understand, just like you said. And through their eyes, this is completely insane. You know, even if you say something like the future doesn't exist, they're just like, what are you talking about, dude? Of course the future exists. There's gonna be a tomorrow. Um, and we get it because we were in that state of mind. We're in that state of being. But now that we're out of it, it's so hard to, at least for me, it's hard for me to talk to people and try to get them out of it. And I guess maybe part of it is for me to stop trying because they're on their own path, and maybe perhaps I'm not the one to try to get them out of it. That is something that like really triggers me when I talk to my dad because for me, I feel like he's the type that he is a quote unquote realist, which um that term doesn't even make sense to me, to be honest, because like real, unreal, everything just is. And he's like, yo, society is this way and you got to be this way in order to fit into society. And I'm like, no, like I used to agree with that. And I'm like, all right, I guess I just got to mold myself to fit into society. but I don't want to deny that anymore. I don't want to, it just feels off. The way the world is just feels unnatural. And a lot of things almost feel reversed. Um, Kind of like we're taught to care for other people above ourselves. And we neglect that self-love so much. And it creates this society based on expectations, conditional love. And I don't agree with that at all. And I'm like, Dad, I don't want to live like this. And I want to change how society works. And their attitude is just that's what scares them. They're like, holy shit, our son is like talking crazy shit. And yeah, so that's so tough. Um, but it's comforting to hear this, that for you, when you chose yourself, your mom adapted. You know, she was kind of forced to adapt and become more self-sufficient and self-reliant on this internal source instead of relying on external source, which is you. So it gives me a lot of hope that, okay, like for my parents, I know that this is possible, because if you went through that with your parents, I know for sure I can do that with my parents. It is difficult.
I didn't expect them to change though.
Okay.
I was okay with them being the way they are,
Mm.
limiting my amount of communication with them based on that. So I never had, well, that's not true. I had expectations. I had hopes that they might be more accepting of me and my choices, but over apparent time, it did seem like that also dropped because it
Mm.
doesn't matter. It doesn't,
Mm.
they have their reasons for being the way that they are, and they're, who knows if they're ever going to change. Um, like I was really okay with not being so close with my parents, which was
Oh, I see.
painful. But
Yeah.
um, yeah, again, I made sure they were okay. You know, I made sure I
Mm.
was there if as much as I could be, but other than that, I was willing to let them go because um, their life, their apparent life, and their life trajectory is
Mhm.
is not up to anyone. It's just the way it's going to be, and
Mm.
it's not it's not anyone's job to change anyone.
Yeah. Yeah.
It does put a burden on you too if you think that you need to change society or you would like to.
Mhm.
um, that's something that was strongly here as well, because obviously we prefer more peace and more love and yeah, more self-love and less suffering for people.
Mhm.
But at least how it's seen here now is like it's going to be the way it is because you can't save anyone. There's no one there that's really suffering. And again, their own unique life trajectory will play out, apparently play out the way it's going to play out.
Mhm.
And I do think there's nothing wrong with you trying to explain to people too, because this character did that too, as much as she wanted, and then
Mhm.
saw that it never made an impact really.
Mm.
Maybe it made kind of an impact, but mostly it pushed people away.
Really? Wow.
A little bit.
Yeah, I
Um,
see.
so and it seems like when you're not trying to change people,
Mhm.
it seems like a tactic that I'm telling you, but it just seems on reflection like when I'm not trying to change people, when I really just accept them for who they are,
Yeah.
because they are beautiful the way they are, even with all of the trauma and the pain and the suffering.
Mhm.
And of course, you feel compassion and you there might be an action or something said to try and alleviate that. That's totally normal.
Mhm.
But if I take my sister, for example, because I'm so okay with the way she is now,
Mm-hmm.
she has a lot of trauma. She has a lot of pain. And I've always tried to heal her or help her,
Mm-hmm.
give her advice.
Mm-hmm.
But now it's like the lightness in our relationship is phenomenal.
Mm-hmm.
It's just what it is. And it's appreciated for what it is.
Yeah.
But it is different with my parents. Like it depends on uh how open they are to me as well. So with my dad for now, our relationship is even less there.
Yeah.
So I really don't talk to him that much because
Mm.
there's an acceptance for who he is. And he just kind of wants to live his own life with his own family. So that's where it is right now.
I see.
And with my mom, she's becoming more accepting of how I am. So we have become a little bit closer in certain ways, but I still don't talk to her that often. That urge doesn't arise. It's just,
Mm-hmm.
checking up here and there. But uh, so it does depend on the parent, both parties, I guess, how it plays out.
Mm-hmm.
Um, you know,
I see. I like hearing you talk about that. I was the guy in my friend circle and in my family circle who I always try to help everyone because I can clearly see what was the root of their suffering. And I guess this was prior to my quote unquote awakening. Uh, but after my experience, because I know everyone and everything is okay and everything will be okay, I kind of backed off of all my friends, and I just let them be. Even if they, like one of my friends recently got a girl pregnant and he might be a dad at a really young age. My mind is kind of like, yeah, he'll be all right. Like that's part of his story. And on the surface that might appear as selfish, but I think it's absolutely perfect. The thing is, I think when it comes to my parents, that's where my struggle is because I'm closer to their story. I feel like I'm very deeply ingrained in their storyline because I am their only child, and they've they say this a lot, which is like everything we do for you, which is quite toxic. Like on the surface, it sounds like aw, but now looking back at it, it's like, nah, dude, like you can't do everything for me because then now I feel obligated to do and live my life the way I think you'd want me to live my life. And it's just quite toxic. This mental, I think, is quite common in the Chinese community where like we do this for the next generation and imposing this onto them. I see this with all of my cousins. There's just this friction between the parents and the child because what the parents want for them is not what they want for themselves. I I do want to learn to, I guess, care less and not try so hard to try to change my parents. This is the first time I've heard this, which is that coming from you when you said you don't really like mind, you don't really like care too much. I don't want to say care, it sounds a little callous, but I think you understand what I'm trying to get at, where you're taking more of a back, you're taking a back seat when in regards to their life. And I guess that made me realize that, damn, I do care way, way, way too much. And it's screwing me up because I had this innate sense of like, oh, I want them to change, but that's not going to serve either of us in any way. So it's time to really just let that go. Um, and switching the line of questioning a little bit, I'm curious, like, was there a singular event that happened to you that triggered this change in perspective of yours, or was it like a gradual thing that happened?
I do want to say something about obligation first.
Oh yes, yes,
Um,
please.
The conditioning here also was so strong because there was a lot of sacrifice. I mean, my parents didn't come to this country for us. They came here and then they met each other and then they had kids.
Mm,
So it was different in that way. But my mom would still use that card of like, we've sacrificed so much for you. How can you not do this for me? She would blatantly say that.
wow.
So at a certain point, she didn't say that in the beginning, but when I was more and more extreme, she was using those cards.
Yeah.
And but yeah, it did take a lot of just like a lot of anger here would arise and just like this is not fair. This is just
Yeah.
not fair that um I have to feel this shitty of a person just for doing what I want.
Right.
Um, but it was more like being with whatever arised. So this is for the person, this is for the me, but the person, whatever arose, whatever got triggered,
Hmm.
it was an opportunity to meet that. And it was kind of like meeting that inner child that was never seen, was neglected, was there was so much burden put on her. And so she ended up neglecting her own needs and putting others first.
Yeah.
So just feeling all of that which was triggered and using it as okay, this needs to be felt because this is kind of in the story, it's the little child that felt really neglected and unseen.
Hmm.
Because otherwise it will just keep getting triggered and there's nothing right or wrong with that. That can
Right.
continue. um yeah. What was I going to say about obligation? um yeah, and my dad would say things like if you suffer now the future will be better. So
Ah,
he lived like that. That was his survival mechanism because
yeah.
his childhood was horrific
Yeah.
and he passed that on to us um innocently.
Hmm.
but but yeah, it's letting all those, I mean, those conditionings are really strong. Okay, so
Yeah.
this is what I was going to say. The conditionings remained even after the happening. That never
Mhm.
really happened, but there was a seeing by no one that it was still very strong, even though there's no one here to take responsibility, to be obligated to help anyone, fix anyone, heal anyone. Um, it was still really here. So, but the thing now is like, it seems like you could see it more easily. And I mean, it could go both ways. You could see it and it could lose its solidity. So it can still play out maybe in apparent time in the story, but no one is there owning it or identifying with it.
When you say seeing it, could you clarify what it is again?
The conditioning of feeling
Uh,
obligated.
okay, gotcha, gotcha.
So yeah, there's this seeing like I don't know if that conditioning is going to continue, and there's
Mhm.
also like a not. It doesn't matter if it continues or not. It'll
Mhm.
play out the way it plays out. No one here is owning it or responsible for it. It's just what it is.
Mhm.
So whether it stays or whether it goes, yeah, there's not really, in a sense, not a caring. No one is here caring about it, defined by it.
I see. Man, obligation is such a big thing. I think I used to only operate under obligation. Like
Yeah.
it wasn't about what I want. It was about what I felt obligated to do, even
Mhm.
when it came to hanging out with friends. Um, I was fortunate enough to have a great circle of friends, a lot of friends. And it was because I grew up as an only child, I was very lonely. So I really wanted to make friends, and they became like the family I chose. But I was spreading myself too thin because I always felt obligated to spend time with them.
Mhm.
Whenever they asked to hang out, I would say yes, at my own expense. And and this was one of the things that I was taught during the ayahuasca ceremony, which is that like let go of obligations. That's not the there's no need to live life like that. It's a very restrictive form of living life. Let go of obligations and bring your mind to the moment. And naturally, when you don't see certain people for a long period of time, you'll naturally start to miss them. And when you come from a place of, oh, I miss them and I want to be in their company, that's
Mm.
much better than from an angle of, damn, I feel obligated to see them. So I resonate with that 100% when you talk about obligation. And another thing that you mentioned that I almost like I was like, damn, when you said it was how your dad said, life is tough in the beginning and then it gets better at the end. I can't believe you said that because that is like my dad's motto. Um, it's so crazy because that was the first thing he ever taught me about life. Remember I was super young. He pulled me aside and was like, "There's really two ways to live life." Um, I'll say it in Chinese, then translate it. He said the first way is 先甜后苦, which is first sweet, then bitter, or 先苦后甜, like first bitter, then sweet. And he used that belief to be like, you should bust your ass in the beginning of your life so that you can enjoy the rest of your life. And I believed him because, like I said, there was this innate trust that I have. I'm like, okay, that makes sense. This being is way bigger than me, and he probably had way more experience than me, and he loves me. So why would he lie to me? So that's the model that I operated under for the longest time. But that is life is not black and white like that. It's infinitely more complex, and I'm relinquishing that belief. And that's something I do want to talk about. Belief is that with a software developer background, the analogy I like to use is like belief is sort of like software. You get to choose what software to download into your system. And when you download that software, you begin to operate with its instructions. So the belief that I download into my system, and it seemed like your dad downloaded into his system, and my dad into his own system, which is, work hard now and enjoy later. And you start living your life based on that. But you don't have to hold on to this belief. You don't have to hold on to this software. You could just uninstall it and then find um, a different belief that is much more serving of you, that is much more in line with how you want to experience life. I'm so curious where this even comes from because you're coming from a Korean background, I'm coming from a Chinese background, and yet that is the same software that was downloaded into both of their psyche. Um, and it's very prevalent in the Chinese culture. There's always these phrases that they use. One phrase that really gets me is this phrase where it's like 打是情,骂是爱, which means hitting is affection, yelling is love, which sounds ridiculous, but that was what my mom told me when she beat my ass as a kid. And that one I didn't very readily accept because the other one I could kind of
Like,
accept, but
holy
this,
shit.
yeah, like, dude, are you serious? You just like this hurts, and you're saying you say this is love? Like, I don't think so. It really warped my relationship with what like love and affection look like, and I can only just imagine how many other parents kind of justified their actions with that mentality. Yeah, man, it's an interesting this is a very interesting life experience is the best way I could put it.
Yeah. The mm, Yeah, I mean, it is just like that's how basically they were raised. And so it seems really believable and real to them because that's their conditioning. That's their
Mhm,
reality in a
mhm.
sense. So, and that's all they know. So, it's not just that it starts out as a belief, it's like it's ingrained in them, it's conditioned in them, probably from childhood.
Yep.
Um, and it's not even like you can just put another belief in there. The conditioning from that belief is still there. So, it could take a parent time to decondition the body and the brain from that, even
Mhm.
though intellectually you can know that's not what I believe in anymore.
Yeah.
Um, and yeah, I mean, yeah, I just think like that generation suffered immensely. They
Yeah,
had
for sure.
wars. It was all about survival.
Mhm.
They couldn't, I feel like those kind of things help them, seemingly help them survive. It didn't really, but like
Mhm.
they latched onto something to make it okay. This amount of suffering has to be worth it somehow. And
Yeah.
so the projection onto the future that it'll be better later,
Mhm.
yeah, it's put later on because there's just so much suffering now.
Yeah.
And yeah, that hope seemingly got them through. It didn't really, but it can really help the person. That hope for the future is, it can be a golden ticket if there's just so much suffering.
Yeah, it could be something that keeps them going, right?
Hmm.
And definitely not to take anything away from their generation because like you said, they suffered so much because I've never been a part of a war-torn country or anything like that. And it's definitely easier for me to be in this state than it is for them. So I definitely recognize that. And in fact, I think it was necessary because it's almost like they build upon this foundation so that I can, or so that the next generation can uh, raise their consciousness or like basically reach a higher state of being. Um, so that's definitely something I don't want to take away from them. And I think for sure for me, it's simply caring too much about my parents' outcome in their story. But really, it's time to just, take a step back. Everything will be absolutely all right. And
Or
yeah.
even if it's not all right, it's all
Mhm.
right.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, I don't think there is such thing as not all right because it's all right. There's no such thing as good or bad. Like for example, my dad got into like a life-threatening situation. I want to say 7 years ago. He got hit by a car, and the person was drugged out of his mind. This was in the hood, and my dad got a concussion, fractured his skull, punctured his lungs because of broken ribs. He had a near death experience. And at the time, you can label that as bad, terrible, however you like. But later on, because of that incident, it actually brought me and my dad closer together because I had to take care of, well, I wanted to take care of him. And that gave my mom the motivation to study for nursing and bring us out of the hood and out of the slums. And now we're in a much better situation financially. So I was able to see that, oh, okay, in the moment, I wasn't able to see how the story ends up. So I comfortably labeled it as this is bad, this is terrible. But later on, as the story further developed, it was like, oh, so that actually ended up being great for the family. And in fact, so because we don't know how this story is going to end, I can never label anything as good or bad. And in fact, this story never ends. It just keeps going on and on and on. So then I've relinquished the need to label anything as good or bad, which is incredibly freeing. Like I love that now. There's no need to label anything as anything. It just is. Um, yeah. that I also learned that, I guess that was kind of reinforced again when I went to Peru and took ayahuasca. I literally lost my mind. Like I I just felt my sanity slipping away. Nothing made any sense. The concepts made zero sense. And I was scared out of my mind, like literally. And I was so afraid of people thinking that I was weird, calling me crazy, calling me ugly, like all these things. And I tried to kill myself. Like it was so horrifying, and it brought my mind perfectly to the moment, which meant that it was infinity. Basically, I was trapped in that moment of pure horror and insanity and terror for all of infinity. And I'm just like, you know what, I want this to end. Try to kill myself. Thankfully, the facilitators stopped me, and after like 7 hours of trying to kill myself in that state of insanity, I finally let it all go. I just surrendered and let it all go. And that was kind of where the aha moment hit me, where it's like, wow, everything is absolutely perfect. When I let go of concepts, I was able to, what felt like I was able to experience and feel the entirety of this universe. And I'm like, damn, like every single thing down to the atom is absolutely perfect. There's not a single thing off. And and then the spirit of ayahuasca communicated to me at that point. It was like, I would never give you an experience just for the sake of terrifying you, just for the sake of traumatizing you. You have to go through that to become stronger and learn that you're absolutely fine. You're always within my arms at all times. You're never truly falling. And that literally changed my life. And I don't mind being called crazy. I don't mind changing the trajectory of my life. That's more so serves me now. I've actually let go of my job, a very comfortable job, and I didn't tell my parents this. I kept them in the dark because I tried to tell them this. Where before I was like, what if I just let go of my job, try to explore, find some more fulfillment? And my dad just kind of flip shit. He just didn't understand the concept of downgrading your pay in any way. Um, so I've and it's so that's why I ended up basically keeping them in the dark. Now I'm like fine financially because I have like savings. Um, it was just a little difficult that I can't show who I am fully to my parents. I don't like lying because if I feel like I'm propping up this fake image of myself that doesn't exist, and that takes energy. And I want to keep using that energy to prop up this image of myself. Um, Actually, sorry, I forgot what my point was. I just got really into wanting to share that
Yeah,
experience.
there was some good stuff there. I might want to comment on some stuff.
Oh yeah, please. It's
Um,
all right. Take your time.
yeah, uh, yeah, it is. It's tough to lie, especially if you as a character just if you value just honesty and it's not really in your character to lie. It could be painful.
Mhm.
So yeah, this character also just ended up telling the truth in a lot of ways, pretending in some ways just to not worry them too much unnecessarily.
Yeah.
But she couldn't hide the fact that she hated design now and couldn't go
Mhm.
back to it.
Mhm.
Um, and it was painful to see their reaction and to see them looking at me as if I was a dropout, as
Mhm.
if I was a failure. And
Mhm.
my friends would I could tell that they would see that too.
Okay.
So it was painful, but I couldn't help but tell the truth in that way. Um, I would rather feel that hurt than to lie. But again, there were certain things that I did lie about. I said
Mhm.
I'm yeah, doing certain things for money. Or I couldn't just tell them that I was meditating all day or like reading spiritual books and
Mhm.
just watching spiritual stuff on YouTube. Like that's
Yeah.
all I did.
Mhm.
So in some ways I did lie, but there is something you said about the past generation allowing this generation to raise their consciousness or something like that.
Mhm.
And that could be relatively true. And it's a beautiful story.
Mhm.
I do think that yeah, in the story, it could be true in the story.
Yeah.
But if that story, it's just a story. And
Mhm.
ultimately we really don't know what is going on.
Yeah.
And that can also provide this undercurrent of obligation, like you owe your parents because they suffered so much and sacrificed so much. And it's it's just what's happening. It's
Mhm.
always just what's happening. And the story is when meaning, too much meaning is put on that,
Yeah.
it affects the person a lot. The person can't help but put that meaning on that.
Yeah.
Um and feel like I have to value what my parents have been through and make the most of it or prove to them that it was worth it. No.
Yeah. Just let it all go. This, I've never been happier. And yet the people, not the people, really more so the family. I've never been happier. I've never been freer. And yet it's now more than ever, my parents are fearful and worried for me. And before they weren't worried about me because on the surface, everything looked fine. I had a job. I I was alive. I mean, I was healthy, all these things. But the thing is, underneath it all, I was suffering immensely. I was just repressing so much of who I knew I was, and yet I didn't allow it to surface. Um, so I was kind of very ill internally, but externally it looked fine. And now that I feel fantastic, they're 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 kind of interpreting my externals as like, oh my God, there's something wrong, which it's a little bit ironic. And I'm starting to see the humor in it actually. And I think seeing the humor in things really help, um, because everything simply is, might as well laugh about it. It's yeah, it's just going to be a one new experience after the other, no idea what's going to happen. And it's quite beautiful that we don't know what's going to happen. I think the fear of the unknown is no longer justified anymore, because we're always all right. Not knowing what's going to happen is like a gift. It's sort of like a surprise that we've kind of wrapped up in ugly papers called fear. But it's such a beautiful thing that we don't know what's going to happen. If we knew what's going to happen, it's going to be so freaking boring. Um, yeah, and honestly, like this path that I'm on now has brought me so much more excitement. Like I never in a million years in my previous life thought like I would be able to share a moment with someone like you know, just like to be so present together and at peace with no judgment or anything. Before it was all judgment. I was judging myself, I was judging other people, it was just all this judgment. But now all that all that neurosis, all that neurotic thinking is just faded away and we could just be. Um, and I am very, very happy actually to see what's happening all around us because I feel like more and more people are coming to this state of being. And it's so lovely to see. And yeah, I really immensely enjoy this journey that we're all
Yeah.
on. And Suzanne, I don't want to take up too much more of your time. Do you?
It's
I
okay.
do have one more quick question,
Mm.
which is that what are you up to nowadays? Now that your state of being has changed, your state of mind has changed.
I mainly just do YouTube.
Lovely.
Yeah. I chat with some people,
Hmm.
mainly just like one a day or so.
Hmm.
Um, yeah, I'm just kind of taking it as it comes, I guess. There's no real future idea.
Yeah.
There's some ideas floating around, but nothing's like it's just there.
Yeah.
Yeah, there's honestly not really an evaluation of how this life is going. It's just
Hmm.
what's happening.
Right. Right.
Um, the YouTube thing can fall apart in any moment, and there's no
Yeah.
one here grabbing onto it really.
Hmm.
There is pleasure in it. There's
Yeah.
excitement around it, and there's joy in interacting with apparent others like this.
Yeah.
But ultimately, it does seem like no matter what happens, doesn't matter too much. Like there's
Hmm.
no one here that minds too much. Obviously, if things are really shitty, then there's a preference to probably make that better.
Yeah.
But um, there's not too much thought about it, I guess.
Gotcha. Yeah, I'm always curious to hear about someone in your state of being, like what your I guess day-to-day life is like. And it does give me some comfort because I was, well, nowadays still is just meditating for long periods of time and also YouTubing, which is really, really fun. And I didn't know if this was all right because when I look around everywhere, in my friend circle, it's like 9 to 5 type jobs. So I guess in comparison to them, I'm like, damn, I'm like the odd one out, but I hearing at least like more people like yourself talk about how your day-to-day life is, especially when it comes to like income and stuff like that, it makes me like feel less alone that hey, what I'm doing is absolutely fine. um i I think I was kind of caught up in the mentality of doing rather than being. And and now it's so nice to just be. And then when I meet people, they're always like, "Oh, so what you been up to? What you been doing?" And I'm like, "Shit, I haven't really been doing anything. I just been kind of just meditating and being, and it's really freaking nice." And so yeah, I'm really glad to hear that there are other people who are experiencing similar lifestyles, and in a sense, it kind of normalizes it in my mind. So that's a great gift that you've given me. And with that, I would like to thank you for this opportunity, Suzanne. Like
Mm,
this is great. I really
it's
appreciate
very
this.
fun. Yeah.
Yeah,
And there's no
likewise.
one special here. It's like when it's just seen like there's no separation. There's
Hmm.
no difference. There's no better than or worse than.
Hmm.
Nothing was achieved.
Hmm.
Nothing happened. Yeah, it's so like annoyingly ordinary. A
Yeah,
person really wanted to be something special, and that's understandable.
yeah,
You can't help but want to be something special.
yeah,
Not well, I mean, I guess some people want to be normal, but
yeah.
um this is such the utter end of division of any kind
Hmm.
in such a thorough way. It's just unbelievable that there was never any border ever anywhere.
Are you in that mind space all the time? Like no border, no separation? Because I've experienced that only a handful of times, but are you just perpetually in that state?
So this isn't a state.
Oh, okay.
Um, so the person can get to certain states,
Mhm.
stay present, um, apparently experience higher consciousness, more awareness. So that's all in the illusion.
Mm,
That's all the person gaining something or achieving something, claiming something or owning something. So there's nothing right or wrong with it. It's amazing that that illusory effect can happen. This
mhm,
sense of, yeah, becoming more conscious or being present.
mhm,
But so this is the end of a sense of me.
mm,
So there is no me. There
mm,
is no one here.
mm,
There's no one here to claim anything or be present or be in a more peaceful state.
I see. Wow. I almost feel the opposite. Like I almost feel that everything is me.
Mhm.
Um, like everything that I can perceive right now is me. And yeah, it's interesting because you said there is no me. And I think yeah, I don't know. It's kind of difficult for me to wrap my head around that because
Yeah.
I came to the experience of everything. I'm a part of everything, and everything is a part of me. But that's still, I guess, an identity. And I guess I don't know. There's definitely something that I haven't um, gotten yet, but I know it's all part of the story. It's all part of my journey, and eventually, if it is for me to get, if there is anything to get, um, I will get it. But if not, then it is what it is.
But yeah, there's nothing to get. So
Yeah,
the me won't get this or achieve this.
yeah, yeah.
It's the apparent dissolving of the me sense.
Hmm.
But then it's seen that the me sense was illusory and it wasn't
Hmm.
really there to begin with.
Hmm.
So that's why it's like nothing ever happened. The memory of the story can still be there, but it's
Hmm.
seen that there was never Suzanne. There was never really a daughter and a sister and a friend. It was all just what was happening, and this apparent body that's conditioned and programmed to act a certain way and say certain things that can continue. And it was
Hmm.
always the case. It was always the case.
Wow.
But there's this extra, you could say a veil or something of a me sense where it says, I was doing that. I made those decisions. I did something wrong.
Hmm.
I did something right. Um, so it's kind of like an overlay that comes on top of everything that's already happening without the sense of me.
Hmm.
Um, but with the sense of me, then this story appears. This story of I am living my life. I am creating my life. I'm making all of these decisions and I had a beginning, I had a birth, and I will die.
Yeah.
Um, and it's really amazing that that's possible.
Right. Yeah.
Um, yeah, so this isn't a maintaining of anything. So no one is here um, maintaining anything.
Hmm.
It's purely just what it is. It's there's since there's no location, like no center here, so then everything has an evenness. So there is no me here and a you there. It's just these perceptions that are happening, these sensing of things,
Mhm.
but no one is in here seeing or talking.
Wow. Has that
So
removed? Oh, sorry, go ahead.
so even the senses, in an odd way, there's no difference between the sensing and the air and the tree and the window and the image of the screen, and there's just no separation.
Wow. I was going to ask, like, in that, has it helped you in any way let go of fear of death?
Mhm.
Mm,
Yeah,
nice.
there's a preference for the body to be healthy and not to be in pain, not to
Right,
die.
right.
That seems to still be here. Um, but there's no one here owning the body.
Mm,
There's no one here saying, this is my body, this is my life.
yeah,
I had a past, I have a future.
yeah.
So in that sense, in the story, when the me seemed like it was dying, it never really died because it never really existed.
Mhm.
But when it in the story, the the me felt like it was dying, felt like it had died,
Yeah.
and it was painful.
I can resonate that with that 100%. I had a very strong feeling that I'm going to die soon, like maybe a few years back, and and I actually stopped going out for a little bit because I didn't want some freak accident to happen. But later, I realized that it was really more so like a moment where my ego kind of dissolved and died. The sense of, oh, this is me, that died, and it was very liberating to have died. As painful as it was, as scary and absolutely terrifying at the time, um, for that personality to die or cease to exist, it it gave me a glimpse of, like, I guess what always was, and the illusion was shattered briefly. And yeah, that was absolutely such a gift. It at least for me, it definitely helped me get rid of like the fear of death, because it was almost like I never was. So there's nothing to lose at all. And
Mhm.
I'm immensely, immensely thankful for this experience, because I guess prior to this, I didn't know an experience like this existed. So no matter what happens between birth and death, I'm coming out. I'm coming out as like a net positive, because I've been there's just this gift of this experience, and that's really the only thing I can call it, is simply an experience. Yeah, it's so lovely. And when you said about not having this concept of my life or me, that that kind of aroused something within me, because the concept of mine, the concept of possession, is so foreign to me now. Even when talking about like spouses or partner, like my my partner, it feels so foreign to me now, because I don't they can never be mine. I can never possess them. They simply are, and we're simply sharing a space together. And it kind of opened up my mind to seeing how a lot of the world operates in this "that's mine, that's not yours" type of mentality, which I think causes a lot of the conflict. Um, this might sound really weird, but it's even the conflict, I'm starting to see the fun in it. Like, this seems like a really fun game. This seems like a really interesting story, like the best story that can ever be told. and it's all just for fun. Um, and that's awesome. We all get to play characters in this game. It almost feels like God is just putting on a puppet sock in all of his like infinite hands and just like messing around, fucking around, talking to each other, creating a storyline, and it's so freaking fun. Um, yeah, man. Honestly, I would love to chat more in the future if you are willing, because I there's just so many things that I would like to pick your brains on. And also when when speaking with you, when you say certain things, it does like arouse within me certain ideas or feelings that I find really comforting and relaxing. And there's almost this feeling of, oh, that sounds so like it resonates so well, but it's so hard to put into words, but it resonates with me so well. Um, so if, of course, if you're willing, I'm definitely down to
Yeah, for
do
sure.
this again.
Yeah, this was super fun.
Yeah, likewise, Suzanne. This was
Yeah.
absolutely lovely. If you don't plan on posting this, could I get at least get a copy? Because this is
Oh
such a
yeah, for
fantastic.
sure. Yeah.
Okay.
I'll send it to you and I'll probably post it because I do feel like um yeah, it's just a story, but like the Asian thing is just really interesting to me too. Um
Yeah, yeah.
yeah.
I before you, I didn't come across any single person that had like the Asian perspective that was actively sharing it, at least. So that immediately struck my interest. And
Mhm.
yeah, I think we can explore that so much. And it's so it's weird to say this, but I find it so cool that there's all the similarities with our culture, despite being like Korean and Chinese, how there's this familial expectation and obligation placed on the child. So we can, yeah, this was such a gift to be able to talk to you about this.
Yeah.
Really cool stuff, Suzanne.
Yeah, and I really like it when people can ask me the questions because I also don't really remember that much. But if you ask me the question, it comes up.
Oh, okay.
So it's also nice here to reflect in a way
Hmm.
because all of that is seen to never have really happened,
Hmm.
but it's still nice for whatever reason to yeah, reflect on it, I guess.
For sure. Yeah. That's pretty interesting. I didn't know that it was like drumming up memories for you,
Mhm.
but
Yeah.
glad to hear that that was an effect.
Yeah, the memories are still there apparently.
Hmm.
It's just not that accessible on its own, I guess.
Hmm.
You know, like I can access it if yeah, I guess a question is asked or something, but otherwise the mind apparently the thoughts don't really go there on its own.
Hmm.
Yeah.
I love that. I have a similar effect with my memories. Well, the past and the future. It just though it's not nearly as strong. I think my conditioning was quite strong in terms of memories, and I will always dwell in the memory, so it was very easy to kind of drum up those memory spaces and live in that mental realm of the past. Um but yeah, it was definitely causing a lot of suffering. So being in the present moment, it kind of, the way you put it that I absolutely love in one of your videos was that like I believe it was like these memories no longer have that like stickiness or gravity to it, and that is the best way to possibly put it, because it was so sticky before. Like I couldn't let go of the memory. It was just so there, and I was living everywhere but in the present moment. And yet this present moment is the only thing that truly exists with any real substance. um that was really insightful to hear come from you.
Mm, nice. Yeah. So yeah, keep in touch. Let's do this
Yeah,
again.
Yeah, absolutely. You have my email. I mean, yeah, you have my email. Feel free to reach out to me about anything. This has been lovely. Thanks again, Suzanne.
Sure. Okay.
All right.
Bye.
Bye.